I think I might be slightly better than you because I'm not a Sixers insider, and if you're inside any of this, it kind of sucks right now. Obviously, you're with 97.3. You do Coming In for a Landing podcast as well, and I just got to figure this out, Paul. I'm trying to get to the bottom of this. I've had over 48 hours to digest it. What the hell, man? What happened?
I think the Sixers would like to know what actually happened because I still don't know. I'm still like, as we're sitting here, Mark, I'm still in shock.
Right?
All along since game one, I have thought the Sixers are a better team than the Atlanta Hawks. Even now, after they've lost that game, I still feel like from a talent standpoint, this is a better team than the Atlanta Hawks. But, the proof is in the pudding. They haven't been. For 3 games, they have not been the better team. And because of that, here we are. They're down 3-2. So, yeah, I'm still pretty stunned by it myself. It's I have to say, and you and I growing up in this area, we know there have been some shocking, embarrassing, surprising, weird losses, and this is way up there. This is one of the worst I've ever witnessed or been a part of.
It is pretty atrocious. And it's funny you say shocking and you're still kind of shocked. I just did a Farzy in the Field bit. I taped it yesterday. And I was walking around, and it was the first time that you could really see emotion. First time in a long time, I should say, where you could really see emotion carrying over into the following afternoon. Like, that's what like, people were still so bothered by it. If somebody was walking around with a Sixers shirt, I was just like, hey, first off, you're brave. I admire the hell out of you for wearing that right now. And second, if you could talk to the Sixers, what would you say right now? And it's like so many people, like, it was a sincere, you broke my heart. And they haven't been eliminated yet. We got to wait till tonight, Friday night, when they actually do that. But I've never seen the emotion carry over for that long, Paul. So you are not alone. And I'm with you as well. I still can't believe it. I still can't believe that Tobias Harris had 4 points. Ben Simmons was 4 of 14 from the free throw line. He had 14 foul shots, and he had 8 points in the game. Are you of the school right now? And here's my question. Are you of the school right now to look at the players more than the coach or the coach more than the players?
Man, I got to put it on both. I really do because, yeah, I mean, you've already touched on it with Ben Simmons. I mean, and I've been a guy who, whether I'm talking to you, whether I've written stuff, whether I've talked to other outlets, like whether it's my own podcast, I have defended Ben Simmons a ton. I really have. And he's making me look bad. I mean, quite frankly, this is brutal. For a guy, this is historic how poor he shot from the free throw line. And that's the crazy thing. Like, take everything else out of it. Like, yes, the offense, it's been really poor for 2 straight second halves. In game 4 and game 5, the offense was just non-existent. The only 2 guys that hit a field goal in game 5 in the second half, Joel Embiid and Seth Curry. Take Tobias Harris out of the equation for a second, him only scoring 4 points. If Ben Simmons is just his normal self at the free throw line, he is a 60% career free throw shooter. If he is just normal, they might have already won this series. So to me, like, the fact that we're here, he is shooting free throws at an historically poor rate. I saw, I think it was from StatMuse, where, this would be the second worst percentage-wise free throw shooting postseason of any player ever, behind Ben Wallace, when Detroit was kind of going through their run. So it's mind-blowing because even like the biggest of Ben Simmons detractors could not have seen this to this level. And Mark, if you're shooting 60% from the free throw line, teams aren't purposely fouling you to put you there. Like, that's not a part of a defensive strategy to make that happen.
Right.
So it's just, I can't believe how poorly he has done from the free throw line. And Doc Rivers tried to tell us, I don't think it's bleeding into other parts of his game. Mark, how can it not?
Yeah, really.
When you're shooting that poorly from the free throw line, when you have the ball in a regular offensive set, how can that not creep into your mind, how poorly you've done and how much quite frankly, have hurt the team by not hitting shots. And, you touch on Doc, how much is the players? How much is the coach? It's Doc Rivers too. I mean, 2 games in a row, the offense was putrid. I mean, not moving the basketball, not playing with pace, all of these things that he preaches, and they haven't done for 2 straight games. And then on top of that, his lineups, like, we all joked about the all bench lineups and when they would end, and I really thought they would end in the postseason. And even this all bench plus Tobias lineup, it's not good enough. He's got to stagger more. He's got to incorporate more of the stars. I get the starting lineup is very good. You want to keep them together, but you have to stagger. Like in Game 6, it's got to be, the 4 main starters playing 40 plus minutes and 2 of them always being on the floor. You can't win any other way.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you mentioned Tobias Harris. I don't give anybody a pass ever, but there's definitely a ranking system for my pissed offness and who gets the most of it. Tobias was more towards the bottom of the list than he was the top because he's been your most consistent player. And he was almost, and I hate this expression, but it was like he was almost due for a complete clunker. I can look at Tobias Harris and say, all right, you know what? That's your one game. It's not the game to do it, but that's your one game. But if you know he doesn't have it for the entire game, that's when Ben's got to step up. That's when Joel Embiid just has to put everybody on his back when he knows Ben's not going to be the one to step up and still take over. Seth Curry, by some act of God, was incredible in that game for the vast majority of it, but it was him and Joe carrying this team in the second half. When you look at Tobias Harris, do you see an injury problem? Do you see just a bad game? What did you see? Why was he so unproductive in Game 5?
I mean, I see a bad 6 quarters, Mark, because it's not just Game 5. It was going back to Game 4. He wasn't good in the second half of Game 4 either. And I saw a hesitancy that to me, it was alarming. A couple plays where shots that he has hit, to your point, all season long, where he has been, he joked about it during the season where Philadelphia fans, they were ready to run him out of town. They would have gladly driven him to the airport after last season and how poor he was in that Celtics series. And he had a hell of a year. Give him a ton of credit. He changed his game. He improved a lot of things, did a lot of things better. In the first round against the Wizards, he was spectacular. Even through 3 games in this series, he was very good. I do not know what has happened to him over the last 6 quarters. It's just there's this weird hesitancy, and we all have kind of talked about them choking, and there's just like no other way to put it. They choked. I mean, they flat out the last 2 games have choked, and Tobias Harris is a big part of that. Mark, and I don't love to bring this up. I'm not the guy who always says this kind of thing, but he signed the richest contract in Sixers franchise history. You cannot score 4 points in a playoff game, in a pivotal playoff game, 2-2 at home. That can't happen. So, like, you talk about, like, your level of pissed offness. I'll call it my level of just flat out blame. And him and Ben Simmons are, like, neck and neck for me. I mean, that's, for both of them, the way they have played the last 6 quarters, that cannot happen. And I think it's cyclical. I think it's both of them. I think it's when Tobias Harris is scoring, it allows Ben Simmons to take on more of that facilitator role and not put pressure on him to score. When Tobias Harris isn't scoring, it exacerbates Ben Simmons' weaknesses. And I think those two together, it's been a poor mix over the last 6 quarters. So we'll see what happens going forward. Let's see if they figure some things out. But, man, it's really discouraging stuff from both of them.
Well, first off, you're preaching brilliance, my friend. You're preaching brilliance. I just want to make sure you know that. Second, when we do look at Ben Simmons, and I know a lot of people they have him on the trade block right now. I know a lot of people already had him on the trade block. I don't want to say how justified is it because I know people are pissed off no matter what, so that justifies it. But how legitimate is it? If they can't turn this around, he was already on the trading block once, according to multiple reports for James Harden. How much do you think Daryl Morey or Doc Rivers will be looking to move on from Ben Simmons if he can't turn this around offensively?
I think it is like the grayest of it. Like it is not black and white. It is a lot of gray area for this. Now, like you mentioned, could they win Game 6, force Game 7 at home in Philadelphia? That can still happen. I don't feel super confident in that happening, because it's a lot of emotional recovery and psychological recovery they're going to have to do over this loss. Could they do that and perhaps force a Game 7 and then, again, a Game 7 on their floor? Sure. But, if from what we've seen, if this goes south and they do not win this series, you have to consider, like, there has to be a shakeup. You can't go into next season with this roster. And I think the big issue, Mark, and I wrote about it on 97.3, ESPN.com, is you have 3 max or near max players in Embiid, in Simmons, and Harris. None of them are shot creators. That's not what they do. They are very good at other things. They are special in their own ways in what they do, but they are not perimeter shot creators. They are not a Bradley Beal or a Dame Lillard or Steph Curry, whatever. Take your pick of those kind of guys.
Right.
So can you win when you don't have one of those guys? I don't know that you can. And then in order to get one of those guys, you probably have to move on from a Ben Simmons or a Tobias Harris. So it's going to be a really tricky, I don't think it's crazy to think that Ben Simmons could be on the block again if a player of James Harden, like if Portland decides or Dame Lillard decides, I don't want to be in Portland anymore. Yeah, Daryl Morey would be crazy to not be on the phone with Neil Olshey tomorrow and hey, what will it take to get Dame in Philadelphia? And if Ben Simmons is part of that, of course you entertain that. But the notion that like you should give Ben Simmons away or, kind of trade him right now at his lowest just to do it, I think is silly. But if you can get again, name a guy, Dame Lillard, Bradley Beal, perhaps Zach LaVine. I think that's on the border for me of whether or not I would do that. But yeah. A guy like that would change the dynamic, that would add a shot creator, I think you have to entertain that because I think that's just the one thing that's missing. And look, you look at like what Atlanta did last night. Lou Williams, they dust him off. He goes nuts in the fourth quarter, and he's just a guy who can create his own shot. He's 34 years old, but he can do that. And the Sixers don't have any right now reliable player. They have guys who could do it in spurts, but not anybody reliable like that has done it throughout their entire career, like Lou Williams, they could just turn to and say, hey, go get me a bucket. They do not have that. And I think that's been a glaring hole so far.